Hello, everyone. Leah Rowe here, life and business coach, as well as culture consultant at The Perk. I'm super excited to be here today and talk to you about one of my very favorite topics, and that is remote work. I've been getting a lot of questions recently because of my expertise in the remote area. For those of you who don't know, my background is actually in building, developing, and scaling remote teams and remote cultures. And I myself have been a remote worker for over 10 years. So it's not just something I'm interested in or passionate about. It is something that I'm actually practicing on a daily basis. So I've been asked by a lot of people recently, what am I seeing in the remote work world right now? And how do I see it shaping the future? And so I want to talk about that today. So let's jump on in. So remote work right now, what I'm seeing is, to be totally honest, this was not the ideal way for most companies to start or scale their remote workforce. It happened super abruptly. There was no time to plan or strategize for a lot of companies. So when I work with organizations to become different forms of remote, there is a lot of work that we do before we actually execute and go remote. However, because of the way of the world right now, companies didn't have the opportunity to do that. Also, it's not the ideal way to have your workforce start or scale remote work because we're in the middle of a global health crisis. We are in the middle of a pandemic. So there's a lot of anxiety, worry, and stress that are taking up people's brain space. And so becoming remote for the first time or remote only for the first time is a learning curve and is a challenge in and of itself. But then adding in all this extra stress and anxiety is not ideal. Also, we're all navigating our own unique challenges that are not present under normal work from home circumstances. So for example, a lot of us have our kids at home with us. Some people are working completely isolated by themselves and dealing with feelings of loneliness. Other people have significant others or family members who are essential workers, and so they worry about them going into the hospitals and health systems every day. All of us right now are connected by the fact that we all have something going on that is totally new, and we are navigating in uncharted territory. So not ideal. Also, I want to point out that full-time remote-only work is not for everyone. I'm a big believer in having people have a choice of where they're the most productive and being able to work from the place in which they are the most productive. So for a lot of people, being a remote-only worker is not ideal for them. That's not what they want. Also, for a lot of people who do enjoy remote work, they don't want to work at home. They like that separation, that physical separation between work and home. So maybe they work at co-working spaces or coffee shops, but working at their house is not what they want to be doing. So not ideal. We're seeing a lot of challenges. However, the door to remote work has been opened. A lot of individuals, a lot of companies are seeing the positives, are seeing the opportunities of remote work. We've opened that door, we've stepped through, and I truly, truly believe that there is no going back to business how it was before. So if there's no going back, what does the future look like? Do I think that all companies are going to become remote-only companies? No, not at all. But I do believe we will see a shift. There will be a movement. I believe that most companies will adopt the principles of being remote first. What does that mean? Remote first at a high level is all about equipping, enabling, and empowering your team to be as productive as possible and hit their results regardless of where they're located. And the name remote first is in opposition to physical office first. So a remote first company, you build your teams, your workflows, your communication, your processes, the tools that you use, everything around the concept of being completely remote, regardless if you actually are or not. So remote first companies invest in hardware, software, training, and support that makes remote work possible and extremely productive. I like to think of remote first on a spectrum. So at one end of the spectrum is physical office only. You have not equipped, empowered, or enabled your people to do any work outside of the physical office. Everything has to be done on site. Then at the other end of the spectrum, you have remote only companies. So these are companies that run completely remotely. They have no office whatsoever. Remote first is like this happy medium place in the middle. It is the place where you have the most competitive advantage because your team can work partially or fully remotely or on-site. It is the best of all worlds. I love the remote first model because it doesn't matter where you're located, whether you're in the office, on the road, at home, the way in which you work, the tools that you use, the way you communicate with your team, the way that the workflows happen is totally the same. So there's no friction between the two or between any locations. So my experience is actually in remote first companies. When I first moved to Madison, I joined a CPA firm and we weren't remote at all. And we actually went through the process of implementing remote first practices at our organization. The reason why we did that was because we wanted to be competitive in the market for recruiting talent. So the way that we were able to do that by adopting remote first principles, allowing our employees to choose where they were the most productive, whether it was in the office or at home or on the road, wherever, that really helped us to be competitive, to find great talent and to retain them. Then when I left that organization, I joined a health IT software company here in Madison. And we were already a remote first company. But I realized pretty quickly that being a software company, we could have actually done our work completely remotely. So I asked our CEO, why did he make the choice to become remote first as opposed to remote only? And he said that he believed in order to achieve our business success, he believed the best thing to do was to have all people work how they work best. And for him, that meant two things. How do people enjoy working? And also, where are people the most productive? So he wanted to be inclusive of how everyone worked best. Some people worked best, could be the most productive, could hit their results in the office. So those people came into the office every single day by choice. Then we had other employees who worked best and were the most productive and hit their results working completely remotely. They never came into the office. And then we had a whole bunch of people in between. I was one of those people in between. I'd come into the office probably a couple days a week, and the rest of the time I would work at home. But it was all about being inclusive of how everyone worked best, regardless of location. Where could we be the most productive? Where could we hit our results best? So some things that are not true about remote first companies, it does not mean that you don't have an office. You absolutely can have an office and be remote first. It doesn't mean that you don't have on-site employees. Remote first is all about where are people the most productive and where can they hit their results. If your results have to be hit on-site, you have on-site employees. It also doesn't mean that employees can work from absolutely anywhere. You need to, again, be productive and hit your results. So that means you need high-speed internet. You need to be clearly seen and heard. You need to be in a place that's distraction-free. A little hard right now with kids at home, but that's what's important. And in remote first work as well, being on camera, on video is really important. So high-speed internet, clearly seen and heard, no distractions is really important. I also want to take a minute to differentiate between remote friendly and remote first. Allowing a person to work from home is remote friendly. And that is very, very different from intentionally creating a company and a culture where remote work actually works. So you need to be intentional about the tools that you're using and the company culture that you're building so that you can be inclusive of remote work and where everyone's the most productive. Productivity, big piece of all this. So why would companies become remote first? Well, I haven't had to answer the why question a lot in the past few weeks because it's really obvious that it would have been much easier for companies to go completely remote during this time had they built their companies on remote first principles. But companies in the past have chosen to become remote first, and I believe they will again in the future for cost savings. If not everyone's coming into the office every day, you don't need as big of an office space. You can have desk sharing, you can do hoteling of desks. You don't need as much office space. Also, it's a fantastic way to recruit and retain talent. Again, it's not location dependent. So when I worked at that software company, we needed the trajectory we had. We were growing and scaling so quickly that we needed to recruit from outside of the local talent pool. And because our work could be done remotely, we could recruit from anywhere. And it was a fantastic tool because we could meet people where they were at because we didn't require them to move to us. So it's a huge competitive advantage when you're recruiting talent and also for retaining talent. When I worked at that CPA firm, we had employees who moved. Their partners got jobs in other cities and other states, and we didn't lose our people because they could move with their partner and still do their work. Also, there are tons of studies out there that show that if you give employees the choice to choose where they work, where they're the most productive, you will see an increase in productivity as well as employee engagement. So, in summary, how this wave of remote work happened is not the ideal way to introduce or scale remote work at your organization. However, the door has been opened, we've stepped through, there's no going back. And no, not all companies are going to become remote, but I do believe that most will adopt remote first principles that will help them with their recruitment, their retention, their engagement, their productivity, and it will help them if there's another pandemic or other life situations where your company staff has to become completely remote. That can be done effortlessly. And I do want to say too that this time, this crazy time that we're in, it's going to come to an end. We will return to some form of normalcy, maybe a new normal, but we will return to some form of normalcy. And we can't just go back to business as usual. I truly believe we cannot just go back to business as usual because we're forever going to be changed from this. So we as leaders, as proactive, forward-thinking leaders, we need to start thinking about what are the things that we've been doing over the past few weeks, over the past month, that we want to keep doing, that we want to keep as a part of our company's culture. What are the things we had to do that we don't want to be a part of our future? What do we need to stop doing? And what are the things, based on how everything happened and our reflection of it, what are the things we want to start doing? Who do we want to be going forward? So I want you to start thinking about that while you're in the day-to-day putting out the fires and trying to get through, start thinking about when this is all over. Start planning for that time for you as a leadership team to be strategic and come together and have an after-action review of what just happened, what you did well, what you didn't do so well, what you should have done, what you could have done. Have that after-action review and strategize for the future. Start thinking about that. All right. That is what I want to talk to you about today, and I look forward to chatting with you all tomorrow in our virtual roundtable. See you then.